Welcome to the MuseCast, where we squeeze every last drop of inspiration out of Sunday's sermon.
I'm absent. People are not going to understand how very professional we are, Dan Kent.
I agree.
They're not going to understand. Like, this is a very classy situation we have going on here. We are professionals at what? I'm not quite sure, but we're professionals at something.
Indeed.
Quick sip of caffeine just to kind of get me going. And like we like to do, we're just going to have some full disclosure moments here. Shawna Boren has been up since 1 a.m. And so you get to the point when it was like 5:45 this morning and the alarm typically goes off at 6. So I can kind of help my kids get up and get going. It's just like, there's no going to sleep at this point.
No,
so you just got to stay up and ride it.
Yeah.
So I maybe close my eyes for a good like 15, 20 minutes, but I don't do power naps. They make me cranky. So we're going to rely upon Dan, his goofiness, this caffeine, and you guys to get us through this morning. So
That's right. That's right.
And that is a perfect way to intro this day and this show and say, welcome to the MuseCast and Happy Muse Day.
Happy Muse Day.
Happy Muse Day. He is Dan Kent. I am Shawna Boren, and we are here to continue the conversation from Sunday's sermon that was brought to us by Mr. Cedrick Baker. Woo woo. And we are in our series, God is the Gift.
God is the gift.
Right? Yeah. Okay. God is the gift. And this week we heard about the gift of God's faithfulness, which means we have 2 more weeks in our series to go.
That's right.
And then we're back in Revelation, folks. We're going to end the year getting back into the Revelation series. So that'll be really good. But before all of that, Dan Kent, I need just like a check-in. How are we doing? Like, are we packed and ready to skedaddle? Or are we? I know you've got the sermon coming up this weekend, so I know you're focused. But like, are you leaving from the parking lot to go south?
No, I really am. I'm really focused on doing the sermon and helping in the series in any way that I can. And I have nothing packed. I have nothing ready. So I'm continuing to plug away, business as usual. Barbara is different. She has more of a packing plan, and she's more kind of like, I could start packing the day we left, and I would forget a couple things, but in my mind, the trade-off is that I don't want to have stress. I don't want to have things in my head because I have too many things in my head. So we're a little different that way. But you know what though? This year has been pretty friendly. Like I'm just now starting to get some of the skin issues that I get. And I'm just hoping that I can get through my sermon without any hideous growths or anything. So that's,
our makeup and hair team, they will do wonders. So don't you worry.
Right. Yeah.
Talking about the kind of packer you are versus the kind that Barbara is, it reminds me of myself in that I either pack too much and it's ridiculous and no one ever needs that much, or I forget every single thing and pack not enough. There is no middle ground for me. And so I would love it. Like if I didn't care about being sensible with finances and all that, I would just say, forget it. We are just going to go, and whatever we need, we will purchase when we get there. Like that would be my MO. But I don't know that there's enough finances to cover all of that. Yeah. But I'm the worst. I'm not good at packing for trips at all.
Yeah. Well, it's so much easier now in terms of just like simple things that you need. I mean, you can't afford to just buy everything, but like sometimes you just need a couple things. And especially if you're doing what we're doing, where we're down there for a couple months, we need our supplies and for various things. And now with Amazon, they have these Amazon lockers everywhere, and that just makes it very convenient.
You could literally, like, on the way, do something,
Mhm.
have it dropped at a locker somewhere along the way. I
Yeah.
mean, it's pretty convenient.
It's amazing.
It's pretty convenient. Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, okay. Well, I'm glad to hear that you are not itching to get out of here. Of course, you're being helpful with the series, as you always are. And I know that you're around for resources for all of us, and that's amazing. But we also want your little baby face to be okay. So we need to get you to some warmer, humid weather. So, but before we do that, Dan.
Yeah, we got work to do.
We got work to do, man. We got work to do. Are you ready to summarize us?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
Okay.
This is 1, 2, 3. This is the third sermon in the series. God is the gift, and we got to have Cedrick. First of all, let me just give this disclaimer. I'm going to summarize this sermon, and I know that there are a couple people who sometimes they won't watch the sermon; they'll just watch the MuseCast, and I got to tell you, I mean, first of all, you should. Oh, hold on. There's an earthquake here in Maplewood.
There's an earthquake. Oh my goodness.
Oh no, it's just my knee hitting the table.
Oh, okay.
But there could be an earthquake if you are skipping the sermon and only watching the MuseCast, because that makes baby Jesus very mad. So you should watch the sermon, especially a sermon like Cedrick's, because it wasn't just like, because a lot of our sermons, they're inspiring, they're enlightening, but this one was very moving also, and it's the type of sermon that you can only experience that if you are a part of it, and you listen to it and you kind of experience the whole thing. And so I hope, especially in this case, that people will actually watch the sermon, because I was very moved by it. So and part of it, and his disclaimer too, I guess I would say, is that, I mean, I think we all have different roles at Woodland Hills as teachers. And I think that, like when I'm up there, people see me and they feel good about themselves. Like, oh, well, look at this guy. I'm doing all right, But like when Cedrick's up there, I always feel like, man, I could be better.
What am I doing in life?
What am I doing with my life? He just, every time he speaks for us, I always just feel like he's such a good role model for seeking God, being professional, being just a good person, and so I really appreciate just him. And I'm going to talk a little bit about this next week, but it's not just what we say, it's who we are that's so important. And very grateful to have Cedrick as part of the teaching team with us. With that, he did talk about God's faithfulness, and he really looked at the kind of the background of faithfulness, and hesed is one of the words, emet is the other word. These are the Hebrew words. And just this idea that God is trustworthy, God is there for us, God is dependable. And Cedrick talked about his friend, David, who he considered a very dependable friend, who unfortunately passed away in a car accident about a year ago. But even that, Cedrick was looking at, okay, yeah, this is this person in my life who I can depend on and I can trust, and yet God is infinitely more trustworthy than even David was. And so he kind of talked about that. And Cedrick did a really good job of kind of looking at these verses that just talk about God's faithfulness and God's trustworthiness, and as sort of a scriptural evidence of this. And then he kind of, and this is what's weird about doing the summary is like, there's more to the sermon than just what I'm summarizing here. Sure. But he paints this kind of biblical picture of God's faithfulness. And then he talks about 3 sort of takeaways from this. The first one is that just to always remember that this is not something that we can earn. We're not earning God's faithfulness. God just is faithful. God just is loyal. It's not because God's not faithful to us because we're good boys and good girls or whatever. It's just God is just faithful to us. And so he talked about some of that in the scriptures as well. And it's an important part of our picture of who God is. And if we view God as fickle, if we view God as a God who gives up on us, that's going to radically constrain our faith. And so it's important to get this right picture that even when I screw up, even when I mess up, God is still faithful. It's essential to have that as a key part of our picture of God. The second sort of takeaway that he had is that God is faithful even during troubling times, even when things don't seem like very godly at all. God is still faithful behind the scenes. And even when things don't work out for me, God is still faithful on this deeper, sort of more important level. And we should be able to tap into that faithfulness, and we should be empowered by that to press on, to continue on in the face of adversity, in the face of times of trouble. The fact that we have a faithful God on the other side of our trouble should continue to empower us, because we are going to face a lot of curveballs. We are going to face a lot of problems, and we all will eventually die, and that's something that we have to face. And knowing that there is a faithful God on the other side who has made promises to us should empower us to face those challenges with courage. And then the final thing is that this is the good news of the world. And this is really the point of this sermon, how it fits in the series, that, the fact that God is faithful, that is the ultimate gift, because there's so little in this life, there's so little in this world that we can rely on, that we can trust, that we can depend on as being faithful. And yet the ultimate ground of everything is faithful to us. And that is, I think, the ultimate gift. And this is where, the sermon really kind of gets, you have to experience it. It becomes very experiential, where Cedrick shares this hymn on the faithfulness of God. And it was very moving. And he just really modeled kind of, he showed us on the stage what recognizing that faithfulness looks like, and how moving that is, and how it can be very emotional. And he left us with, I think, just a really great invitation. And that invitation is to just reflect on your life and to think about the times in your life where God has been faithful to you. And I think that's so important, because we have a tendency to remember all of our pain. It's interesting that we tend to remember the things that hurt us, but a lot of times we have a hard time remembering things that we thought, for instance, like things that were really funny. Like we remember laughing, but we don't remember what we were laughing at. And all of the times when we've just laughed and laughed and laughed, it's hard to remember the things what was it that we were laughing at? But things that cause us pain, boy, we remember that exactly with explicit detail. And so it's easier to remember hurt and pain than it is to remember good times and so forth. And so it's such a great practice to just say, okay, just take some time and think about where God has been faithful to you, because it's easy to just let those things drift off into the fog. And so I think that's just a really great activity. And I guess that's kind of my summary. It never does justice to the sermon, but in particular, this sermon, I feel like it was just such a real kind of presence that Cedrick had that I can't capture that in the summary. But hopefully I will motivate people who haven't seen it to actually see it. So what did you think of Cedrick's sermon, Shawna?
I thought it was great. And I'm going to back up for just a moment.
Okay.
And I'm going to say to you, Dan, your summaries, your world-renowned summaries are important to what we do here on this show. So don't trivialize them. You do a great job. And let me just say, I think you're so right. The encouragement that you're trying to give for folks to tune in. And we understand sometimes life gets busy. And so you'll watch the MuseCast maybe first and then catch the sermon or whatever. And what Dan is saying is so right. There are times when yes, you can take really great notes, point 1, point 2, point 3, A, B, C, you know, Harvard notes or whatever. And then there are times when you have to experience the vibe and the tone of how something is being presented. And I think that was what Cedrick's message was. Yes, there was content, of course, and it was good and rich, but it also, I think, was couched in this really lovely, just tone and vibe that he set that was just really powerful, and you could feel it in the room. And when you watch it, and if you've watched it, you can hear people and responding. And so it was really powerful in that way. So don't sell yourself short. Sermon was good, and you encourage the folks to check out the sermon if they haven't, because it was something that I feel like is a gift. And I love, again, I'm going to plug our Christmas series. For those of you who are still doubting that this is truly a Christmas series, I'm going to plug this again and say, we are looking at the gift of God, and we know that all that God is, his character, his true nature, was fully embodied in Jesus. And we celebrate Christmas as what? The birth of Christ. And so with the birth of Christ came all of these things that we're talking about from these passages in Exodus. And as Cedrick was sharing with us and teaching us about God's faithfulness, the thought that kept coming to mind for me was, all of the things he was saying, yes and amen, but then also his faithfulness is just further evidence to me personally, and proof that he is who he says he is. And because he is faithful, we will continue, if we're alert to see, and if we're in tune to see, we will continue to see and experience all of those characteristics of God that we've been talking about over the last couple of weeks, and that we will continue to talk about over the next couple of weeks. So his faithfulness means he doesn't choose one day to be forgiving, and then he's going to smack you upside the head the next day. He doesn't choose one day to bring his compassion and justice and grace, and then next day decide, I'm sick of you. No, faithfulness, that steadfastness, that steadiness, that trustworthiness, that dependableness, that is who he is. That is his very nature. And so out of his nature, we know that we can experience his love and his forgiveness and his grace and his compassion and his justice and all of those things that we've been talking about. And so I felt like Cedrick's topic, not only the way that he presented it, but just his topic in general, was just a great, like, again, a bow on the whole package of who God is and how he desires to relate to us. And I love that we are doing this at this time in 2023, because like we say, I feel like quite often on this show, all you have to do is turn on your TV, turn on your radio. If you still read a newspaper, do that, open your front door, and you will know that death, destruction, polarity, just stuff is just, in the world. And we have to remember that our focus can't be on that. Cannot be on that. Our focus needs to be on who God is in the midst of all of that. And what Cedrick talked about was the fact that in the midst of everything, God is faithful. And I love what you said in your summary, Dan, about we don't always remember all the ways in which he has been faithful. And sometimes I think we don't even realize the ways in which he's been faithful, because we're just going about our thing, and the more tragic things stand out, or the annoying things in life stand out. But his presence, the nature of who he is one who is faithful as he relates to us. And so that is something that we can count on. He is dependable. When even the most closest person to you that you adore and love the most, they are human, and eventually there's a possibility that they will let you down, and that you will let others down. But we can look to God, because he will not let us down, because he is so faithful. So that was kind of a long-winded way to say thumbs up. I really liked it, and
Good.
You did good on your summary. So cut that nonsense out.
Well, no, and I wasn't, again, I'm not, the summary is a summary. It was really, and I wasn't trying to cut myself down, because I feel like that's the best I could do. But it's just that sometimes when you do a sermon, there's something more than the content there. And and the summary is all about content. And and so that's where it was really meant to be like an encouragement for people to watch the sermon than to be a self-deprecatory kind of statement about the sermon.
Well, yeah, because you have confident humility, Dan. So
that's right.
I think
that's right. Yes. Yeah. Did I tell you I wrote a book?
Oh, hey, tell us all about it. Sponsored by.
Yeah, right.
Oh, well, again, we just want to say a MuseCast thank you to Cedrick, because this is the thing. It is a, how do I say this? It is a responsibility, and it is a grand, and I don't mean like because you're in front of people, but it's like a weighty task to present scripture and to try to teach folks. We've talked a lot about that. We take that very seriously. We think it's important, and we want to make sure that we have humble people up there, people who are knowledgeable, and people, who have the hearts and the minds of our community in mind when they're up there. And so all of that being said, that is difficult in and of itself. And then to add to add humility and transparency in the mix of sharing and teaching, it just kind of like ups the ante. And so I just want to say to Cedrick, thank you for that. I know we all know how smart you are. We all know how gifted you are. But to see the vulnerable side, I think was really powerful and really helpful. And I think people really relate to a lot of what he shared because it's real stuff. And so thank you, sir, for your great message.
Indeed. Yep. Well said.
Okay, got some caffeine. All right, Dan Kent. First I want to say we've gotten in some comments and questions. Thank you for those. And one of our questions is from one of our regulars, and I don't know if we have permission to say who it's from, but you know who you are. I'm going to call you Mr. T. And
Is it Mr. T? Did Mr. T send in a question? Wow.
Mr. T listens to the MuseCast, and he sends in questions.
Wow. I bet he pities the fool who doesn't watch the MuseCast. That's what right. I would say.
Pities the fool. And he's got some wardrobe suggestions for you, like in, some gold chain situations. Oh, nice. He's going to set you up for this weekend. But so I do not take fashion advice from anybody except for Mr. T. That's the only person I would take fashion advice from. That's good to know. Good to know. So Mr. T, we did see your comment and your question. You were asking if we could kind of expound on something a little more, and we're not going to do that today because we need you to stay tuned to what's coming up this weekend, because you're going to see some natural progression of what you were talking about with Dan's sermon. And then when we come back next week, I think you'll just see how that all nicely ties together, which is part of the beauty of being in a series, because sometimes there's kind of a continuation of thoughts. So we're not ignoring you, Mr. T. We're just saying pause and we'll circle back. Yeah. All right. But that being said, we did get a good question from Special K. I'm going to call this person. We need to have some sort of do we have permission to say who you are? Yeah. Because my nicknames are a bit ridiculous. I kind of I like the pseudonyms that you come up with. Those are pretty good. So okay, good. All right. Let's see. Okay, so this particular parishioner, Special K, has been tuning into Woodland. He is connected and involved in a variety of ways, and he has really learned from the moments and times that Greg and others on the teaching team have really cautioned about taking a single verse out of context. And so this person is really diligent to not do that. And so they wanted to ask, because Cedrick shared 2 Timothy 2:13 as a part of his sermon. And he wanted to make sure that personally, as he's reflecting and studying, that he wasn't taking that out of context. That verse being, if we are faithless, he remains faithful. He cannot deny himself. Special K has clinged to this verse for himself, believing that no matter how badly or how often he messes up, even if he's not holding up his end of the covenant, that God will still love him and draw him closer. But then you've got that little thing in your head of ooh, am I just trying to fit this verse into my narrative? Am I taking it out of context? And so, So he's just wondering if he has taken that out of context, or is he on the right track? He has some other things in there. I don't know how much more in depth you want me to go into his.
Yeah,
his
well, because in particular, what he's talking about is it seems like it's very unconditional that even if I screw up, God is going to, and I think that's where verse 13 really kind of, that's why it's such a feel good verse, because even if I screw up, God is faithful. That's great. But then beforehand, there's all these if statements.
Yes.
Like if we died with him, we will also live with him. If we endure, if we disown him, there's all these, it sounds very conditional all of a sudden when you put it in context. And he was kind of reflecting the questioner. Seymour Butts, was that his name? I can't remember. No, Special K. That's what it was. That's what it was. Yes, yes.
I will forever be naming the people.
Yes. Okay. Good. I forgot what the pseudonym was.
Oh my goodness.
No, Seymour Butts was the author of Under the Bleachers. That's different person.
Yeah,
different
it's
person. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So his concern was that, it seems like in the Old Testament, sometimes the covenants are more conditional. And this idea that God has this unconditional love, he was just wondering how does that all fit in? Well, when I look at this, I would say that absolutely God's love is unconditional. His offer to us is in the form of covenant. He offers us this relationship, and we have the choice about whether or not we can enter into that or not. That's where the conditions all lie. The conditions are my conditions. Like, do I want to give myself to this covenant? Do I want to enter into this relationship? And that's where all the ifs are. All of the ifs are in my lap, not in God's. God is faithful. God has offered this. He has made these promises. He has given us this opportunity. Now the question is what am I going to do with it? And so this is why in the Old Testament, Deuteronomy, Exodus, even in the intertestamental writings, you have this idea of God placing before us this choice between life or death, blessings and curses, between fire and water, and so that's where the condition is. The condition has been placed in our laps. And so now when you look back at this, it says, if we have died with him, in other words, Christ died for us. And if we have died with him, that is, if we have given ourselves into this covenant, if we have placed ourselves in Christ, then we will also live with him. So if we have died with him, we will also live with him. When God placed this choice in our lap, if we said, yes, I will die with Christ, then we will also live with him. If we endure, that is, if we stick with this covenant, if we remain faithful to this covenant, then we will also reign with him. But if we choose not to, if we choose to disown Jesus, then God will allow us to exit that relationship. That is, he will disown us. But it says that even then, if we are faithless, he remains faithful. In other words, even if we disown Jesus, even if we turn away, there is this potential to come back to God. We are all potential prodigal sons. God will remain faithful. Not to say that there aren't consequences, or anything like that, but God will remain faithful even when we're not. And so that's what I would say, is that God's love for us is unconditional. It is ever present. It is overwhelming. It is always there, no matter what we do. However, God has given us a choice. God has placed in our lap a choice between life or death, blessings and curses, fire and water, light and darkness, and so forth. And that's where the conditions are. The conditions are always with us. The love and the faithfulness is perpetual from God. Yeah.
That was good, Dan. Thank you so much for expounding on that. The only thing I would add is that to Special K, if Second Timothy, if that verse in Second Timothy has brought you comfort, continue to glean comfort from it. Yeah. And also, look back on those previous verses when you feel so led. I use that as kind of like Dan likes to kind of say, like a check, like a little check engine light, just to kind of see, where you are in your life. But I love Dan's response to your question, and because it reminds me so much of our belief at Woodland. And we're not the only ones who believe this, but this is like one of our foundational things is this relationship that we're in is covenantal, and it's not contractual. And so in a contract, yeah, you have to lay out the parameters of the contract. You're going to do this and I'm going to do that. And then if you fail to do this, then I'm not, so that's contract. But within covenant, God is presenting himself to us. And these are the verses that we're talking about in Exodus. This is like the whole point of our series. He is presenting himself to us. This is the kind of God I am. This is my character. And this is how I want to relate to you. We have the choice to respond. We have the choice to walk away. And if there is ever a shut gate between us and God that we feel is locked up and padlocked and closed tight, guess what? It's closed from our end, not from his end, because his arms are open wide toward us, but he respects us and allows us to not choose him, which, oh my gosh, if you've ever loved anyone or anything in your life, to know that they could not return that love, it's heartbreaking, that possibility. But God loves us. He doesn't make us return that love. He doesn't make us relate to him in the way that he relates to us. And so I think Dan was absolutely right. Like, the conditions are on our end and we get to choose them. And there will eventually, we don't know when, there will come a time when it's like, okay, you've made your final choice, but we don't know when that is or how that is. And so we don't need to but in the here and now, God is always choosing us. He is always coming after us. He is always walking toward us, and it is us who choose to turn our backs or not. Yeah.
That's right.
All right. One more question for you, Dan. You up for it?
Sure. Yeah.
All right. This is good. This is a bit more like, in your heart, less so in your head. But I just want to know if you could say to people, especially given, the reality of living in a fallen world as we do, why do you think it's so important to be reminded of God's faithfulness? And because many people will go, here they go again, your little, like you like to do, here they go again, being all Pollyanna about it, sticking their head. No, we are not ignoring the crap that happens, and we're not ignoring the fact that things in our lives can go really awry. What we are saying, though, is that does not mean that God has abandoned us and he's not faithful to us. So why, Dan, do you think it's so important for people to hold on to this reminder, this promise of God's faithfulness during troubling times?
Yeah. There's probably multiple reasons, but I just think for me, I'm flooded with so many thoughts and so many ideas and so many angles to it. And I'm having a hard time just picking one, but I guess one thing I would say, and Cedrick really sort of tapped into this, is that, we're talking about a world where, Jesus is God. God actually became human, and humans killed him. It's like, that's the world that we're in, and where even the Son of God gets betrayed. Even then, even God gets betrayed here. And so how much more so are, you and I going to get betrayed and in this place? And you just get, living in a place where there's betrayal like that, where there's self-centeredness and greed and all of these things, it wears on you. And it can, I think, left unchecked, it can twist us. It can twist our spirits. And if there is nothing outside of just the world as we see it, then there's no reason to fight back against the forces that compel us to be self-centered and to compel us to be liars and to betray. And but if there is really this God on the other side of this world who is faithful, who has made these promises, who calls us to be true and calls us to be loyal and calls us to be good. Well, now there's this big reason. There's this force that holds me, that secures me, even in the face of the betrayals and the untrustworthiness of this kind of sham of a world. And I just think that that's why it's such good news that I mean there really is something I can depend on. And the fact is that if that's true, if God is faithful, then his love has meaning. It doesn't matter if God, loves me if he's not going to be faithful. You can't, so like the fact that God is faithful to his promises and that we will dwell together and all of that, now suddenly that secures me in a way that helps me now and motivates me now, the way Cedrick put it, empowers me to now try my best to live faithfully and trustworthy and lovingly to those around me. So I think that would be the best that I could say off the cuff. So how about you? What do you get from that?
Well, first, you're not done yet, sir. So
oh, really? Wait a minute.
I need you to stick with me for a second, because there's a part 2 to my question. I like putting you through it, Dan.
Yes, you are. This was not in my contract.
Yeah. Well, let's talk that over during our next negotiation.
Right.
So my part 2 is because these are all part of Cedrick's points, and so one being that even during troubled times, God is faithful. Yeah. And so thank you for speaking to that. And you even highlighted his third point of this is good news, and this, and so I love that. But let's circle back, and I'm going to ask you to tag on to what we were just talking about, and talk a little bit about this faithfulness not being earned, because I do think that even gets back to special case question, about when we mess up and stuff. And I know, I think we all we have that head knowledge of, oh, it's freely given. And, but it's hard sometimes to, in our daily lives, when we recognize what, bozos we are, to recognize that even when we are just not faithful covenant partners, he still is. And so can you just talk a little bit about the fact that this faithfulness that he has toward us is not something that we have to earn, but nor is it something that we need to just take so lightly that it doesn't matter to us.
Right. With the faithfulness thing, it's tricky because, what is God faithful to? I think that God is faithful to us, and this is partly what I'll talk about next week. I think he's faithful to us, and part of his faithfulness is motivated by his delight in us, and and he delights in his people, and that delight is not earned. It's not like God delights in us because we put on a good show, but at the same time, it's we're also worthy of that delight. There is a sense in which we are worthy of God's delight. Now, our behaviors sometimes mock that delight, and our sin will definitely mock and betray and sabotage the parts of us that are inherently delightful to God. But I tend to think that God's delight in us is just this raw, sort of unprovoked. These are the forces that I'm seeing. Is on one hand, you want to say that God's love for us is not earned. It is this free gift. Otherwise, you get into this weird thing where people are trying to be good enough for God, and that's a disaster. But to fight against that, a lot of times people will go the opposite direction, and they'll talk about how terrible and worthless and depraved we are, and it's almost like this contest to see how lowly you can view people. But it's well, that doesn't work either, because God became one of us, and he's fully human. So whatever you say about people, you also have to say about Jesus. And now you're in a sticky wicket, because Jesus is the Son of God and we're supposed to worship him, and he's human. And so how do you make sense of both of those things? How do you make sense of the fact that, yeah, it's not earned, but at the same time, we're not terrible. Our sin is terrible, but we are not. And so that's where I come back and I say, God is faithful to us. He delights in us. We are delightful, even though sometimes we sabotage that delight by our behaviors. And that's what I don't know if that answers it, but that's the best that I could do off the cuff. Did you have an answer that
well, first I have a third, but no, I'm kidding.
Yeah. I wouldn't doubt it.
No, good. You were walking a tightrope there, and I did not mean to steal your thunder from what's coming this week. Yeah. So you did good, sir. Yeah, I think again, for me, the way that it works for me in my brain is to remember this is all about relationship, and in relationship, we should not feel like we have to perform for the approval, for the faithfulness, for the love of the one that we're in relationship with. Like we should just be able to be. And I think the sad thing is because sometimes we feel like God is so like out there, what we have are human examples and interactions, and those are not always ideal. Yeah. And so it's hard for us. And even when you talk about, God as Father, then that can bring on some stuff for people. And so I just want, like, sometimes you got to work through some of that stuff. You need to be honest with yourself and work through whatever that is. And if you feel like you've not had one of these mutually loving relationships in your life, then you need to like sit before the Lord with that. So that aside, I will say our relationship with this God that we're talking about, that is fully loving, fully faithful, fully for us, forgiving of us, gracious, compassionate toward us, is for us and on our behalf. That is not something that we have to perform for, and it is not something that we have to earn. However, because we are in this relationship, we absolutely should desire to be and do better. Not that, again, and so this is where it kind of gets tricky. Like, I think we need to pay attention to when the little warning lights go off on our dashboard. Yeah. The goal is to become more Christ-like. And so when we are alerted to the fact that, oof, man, we're kind of off, we should want to realign, not because we risk losing him, his love, his faithfulness, his relationship, but because we want to be more like him and closer to him. And again, if we are turning our backs, that is on us. If we are walking away, that is on us. He is there. And so I think it just helps me to remember this is about a relationship, and it's a two-way relationship. And so I don't know of anyone who, when loved lavishly, is just like, no, thanks, I'm good. We should, there's some sort of reciprocation that happens, but not because it's required beforehand. And the last thing I will say is about it not being earned, and even in troubled times, because sometimes the troubled times are caused by us and our actions. And sometimes, like I said, we are bozos and we do things that are just not very Christ-like. And so we have sin in our life, we have brokenness in our life, and that's just the reality of it. And it's not as if in those times God is like, come back to me when you get your act together. Come back to me when you've got this all figured out. No, he's right there in the midst with us. Struggling alongside of us. Sometimes as we're facing our own consequences of our actions, he's still loving us and is faithful to us. And sometimes that love and faithfulness is allowing us to learn and grow in sometimes hard ways. But he doesn't like take a time out and just tell us to get our act together and then come back to him. The constant is there. The faithfulness is there throughout it all. So that's what I'll say.
That's good. That's awesome.
Okay. I think I've put you through the ringer enough, Dan, and I know you've got...
I need a nap. So.
Good. Well, and it is hard when you're in a series and, and things do tie nicely together. It is hard to kind of stay in this lane before merging into the next lane. So you did good, sir. All that to say, we're going to very smoothly merge into nugget time. Yay. And so because you have been a good trooper, I'm going to let you decide whether you go first or whether you go last.
I think I'll go first.
Okay.
And I'm going to do what I did last week. This is kind of nice. Having written the meditations, I can just, I don't have to come up with a nugget. I'm just going to do these. So, and guess what? I'm going to do this next week too. So,
oh my goodness. Okay. Yes. Well, we'll see if we'll allow it. We'll see if the council will allow this to be your only nugget moving forward.
Merry Christmas to me. So, so this was the bumper meditation, the gift of God's faithfulness. And I'll include this in the show notes as well. When the waters lay still and the sun shines and the markets are up and crime is down, people, they'll be right there for you. But when the skies growl and when the wind blows and when the waves rage, well, in this place where even the Son of God gets betrayed, it's hard to find much loyalty. But you, Lord, are faithful. You do not leave. You do not quit. You do not give up on me. No, you wait, you watch, and you empower. And I know, no matter the storm, you stand right there in your great lighthouse, looking out over the dark, stormy water. You lean out over the rail, and you watch for me, and you wait for me with blankets and warm food.
I am so impressed, Dan, with these meditations that you're writing. And again, I just want to say thank you for sharing your gift in this way. They are really good, and they're perfect for each week. So good job, sir.
Good. Well, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Good nugget. Good nugget. My nugget is actually this is shock and awe. It's a song. And
are you going to sing it?
I absolutely will not sing it because
come on.
I love you all. I love you all. And so because I love you all, I'm going to spare you that. But what I'm going to say is this is more on the gospel end of, if you want to look at musical genres. I love that Cedrick shared a hymn. This is not a hymn, but I'm going to tell you guys to look up Rita Springer. It's a bit older. And it's called I Have to Believe. And throughout, of course, Cedrick's sermon and my reflecting afterwards, this song just kept rolling around in my heart and in my head. So, because that's how I process stuff a lot of times. So I'm just going to read a couple of the lyrics, but I want to encourage you guys. I Have to Believe by Rita Springer. You can listen to it, but you can also look up the lyrics. And I just think they're really powerful. Says, I have to believe that he sees my darkness. I have to believe he knows my pain. I have to lift up my hands to worship his name. I have to declare that he is my refuge. I have to deny that I am alone. I have to lift up my eyes to the mountain. It's where my help comes from. He said that he's forever faithful. He said that he's forever true. He said that he can move mountains. And if he can move mountains, he can move my mountain and he can move your mountain too. This song is all about God's faithfulness. And the I have to is just saying there is what else would we believe in? Right. Like because of who he is and how he loves us and how he relates to us, we have to believe, and not in a dogmatic way, but just we have no choice. What a gift that we get to believe in this amazing God who is so faithful to us. So Rita Springer, I Have to Believe. It's a really, really good tune. And I think it pairs nicely with Cedrick's sermon. And that is my nugget.
That sounds great. Yeah. It's interesting that you brought up a hymn because it's kind of a gospel hymn because, of course, Cedrick highlighted that hymn. Also, a lot of scholars think that passage in 2 Timothy 2 that Special K and Cedrick used in the sermon, that is also a hymn, and that Paul uses in the letter to 2 Timothy. So I like the hymn theme. Isn't that neat how these themes just sort of emerge from just accidentally?
So cool. So yeah. Super accidentally, right?
Yeah, right.
We come off way more polished and planned than we actually are, Dan. So maybe we shouldn't let people in on the secret because things come together very nicely. All right, sir. I am looking forward to this Sunday. So you guys make sure you tune in. You do not want to miss Dan Kent as he carries us further down the road of our Christmas series. Dan praying for you, knowing it's going to be great. Can't wait to hear it and then talk about it next Muse Day on the MuseCast. You guys have a great week and we will see you next time.